Let's talk to Isaiah. Isaiah, welcome to the show. How can we help you today?
Hello. Thank you. Great to be here, and shout out to my hometown, Austin there.
All right.
Way far away over here in Hawaii. Yeah.
Okay. Not jealous at all. What's going
on? My particular field of interest and kind of curiosity inquiry is looking at the legends of God like a telephone game. Mm-hmm. So all these stories and religions and things that we have here aren't necessarily their first iteration, and things change over time. And in my research, just looking around through them and kind of looking deeper in them, I'm finding a lot of commonalities to the point where I think there was a more original story that has spawned a lot of these.
Interesting.
So we look at God, we look at God anthropomorphically. Mostly, like both religion and atheists. The atheists against this personal, well, not against, but unconvinced of the personal God and things like that. And so I didn't really find a lot of functionality in the subjective aspect of considering God. I wanted to know how the universe worked, and if there is a God, what it actually is, how it actually does things or is responsible for the universe and things like that. So that's the track I've gone down.
Okay.
And, just boiling down all these legends, like I go further back. The story of Nun or Nun is this oceanic, infinite God existence, and that it makes a bubble. And inside that bubble is the only place that creation can happen, because otherwise it's just overwhelmed with this watery existence. Similarly with Tiamat in Babylon, a watery oceanic goddess, her body was cut in half, and the heavens and the earth were made out of her body parts. And that's another major, major theme, that there's some primordial original being that gets split apart, and those parts become all of creation.
Well, yeah, you would imagine that would be the assumption, because before, the Indo-Europe tribes kind of came down to the Fertile Crescent, most of the understanding of biology and how generations formed was matrilineal, right? They assumed that women just spontaneously started giving birth to kids, and that kind of gave that sort of, oh, well, clearly if this is how people come to be, that they become their own thing after being part of a woman's body, in this kind of headspace, then of course that must be, on a bigger scale, how the universe came to be. So I think kind of you're on the right track here, because there are those similarities, but it almost sounds to me like what you're doing is assuming that they're coming from somewhere other than us experiencing a common natural phenomenon and then extrapolating it in similar ways.
I think both is happening. Like you have in the legend, you have people who have some kind of godly experience, whether it be an actual revelation or a hallucination or whatever. That is the compelling aspect that makes them write or talk or share what they've done. I've actually had a few of those, but that's not the track I actually talk about. What I get to is I've worked on a comprehensive theory of how the universe operates from being unfolded from an infinite existence. So the modern stories are intelligent design, like God just willy-nilly creation into existence because he's got a super smart brain and can just think all these things up. What I've found to be much more simple, far less special pleading, and actually results in predictive geometry of how the universe works is inherent design. In other words, it was what we see here, all these forces that appear to be finely tuned, not for life, but for atoms and the stability of the universe as a whole, were unfolded from a previous unity. And that unity in an infinite state would be what I term God, because
so
an infinite absolute, if you want to think of the, go ahead.
Yeah, my question, I guess, Isaiah, because this sounds like almost like a pantheistic approach to things, right? Like the universe is what you call God, and you view it in that kind of way, and that must be where all these stories come from. And my question for everyone who kind of comes to me with this set of claims, and there are quite a few of them, is why use the word God? What about that word or that concept helps you at all? Because to me, I'm happy to say, hey, that sounds like it could have been a thing, maybe. I mean, run it by some scientists who study this, but like, okay, why would we make that jump from universe was infinite to God?
Yeah, that was going to be my question too, V.
Great question.
I'm always curious why people, and not just you, Isaiah. First of all, Isaiah, V and I are both angry at you because you live in Hawaii and we don't. So let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
So if you see some anger here, it's not about you personally. It's just we're jealous as hell.
I completely empathize.
Yeah, you should. It's cold over here, bro. I've always been curious why people, when they're trying to identify origins and how things started and what things began from, and all those questions that honestly we just have more questions than answers as humans so far, and we're still learning. But but when we, like V said, I'm always curious why people feel the need to attach all of that to this God label. Like it's almost like we feel like there has to be a God somewhere, so we have to identify who or what this God is. And so whenever we're coming up with some answers to the questions that we have, we always drag it back to, and that's who God must be. And I'm like V, I'm thinking, why do we feel that that's a default position that we have to go to? And I'm not saying you're doing that, but you did use the term God. And so I think it did prompt V and I both to go, wait, what? Why?
Yes. Yeah. Well, a couple of different perspectives I take on that. One, it's still in the realm of pseudo history, that there was a previous age of mankind that we basically were a worldwide civilization. We had a high-tech capability, maybe not this type of technology we have. But anyway, there was a massive cataclysm about 13,000 years ago. The Earth got bombarded by cometary fragments, and that's what ended the last ice age. So, to wrap all this together, the God stories are what would pass downstream through time in primitive or cultures that have been knocked way back, almost basically to the Stone Age, to have to restart. So these stories, like the God and the Goddess and how things happen, is really important to the storytelling age, to our tribal nature, to make sense of the reality around us in shorthand form. These are like analogous forms of what the actual tech, how the universe actually works, is abbreviated down to. So that's one way.
So you think that there was, wait, let me see if I can get this straight, because this is a lot of information. And I mean, I'm willing to follow you down this rabbit hole, but I need to clarify. So you're saying that there was a previous age in which we were more advanced and connected as a civilization, and in order to preserve that information, we constructed God myths about how the universe works, and it's kind of like code.
That's one of the layers, one of the kaleidoscope lenses that I look.
I mean, this sounds like an awesome Dan Brown novel, but
or a QAnon conspiracy.
I would read the fuck out of this book, or for sure. But
well, I do see.
But that would be.
Go ahead. Sorry.
That as far as legends are concerned, this would be the Zep Tepi that the Egyptians refer to, because they considered themselves, our modern Egyptians considered themselves a legacy culture of a far greater culture before them, when the gods walked the earth and they had all these special powers and equipment and things like that. And then similarly with the Mahabharata, the Vedas talk about the times of the gods are walking around the earth and doing amazing things, shooting beam weaponry and flying cities and things like that. So, and a lot of that would be underwater, under 400 feet of water, in fact, because at the Younger Dryas event, the oceans have raised 400 feet since then. And
okay. I'm gonna have to cut you off here, Isaiah, because this is, again, like, fascinating. I would be happy to talk about this all day. My question remains unanswered, though, which is how does this get back to a God claim? And if what you're saying is God claims our code to talk about the universe in a way that we could understand back then, cool, that's an interesting theory, but that doesn't, to me, make you a theist. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, totally.
Okay.
And to go back to your question about pantheism, what I'm talking about is panentheism, which means the universe is within God.
Right.
It's not. It is not the total of the unfoldment of God. It is a good way to think about it is like if God is an ocean of light, an infinite ocean of liquid light, then universes are finite rainbow void bubbles that have been yanked open. And all
rainbow void bubbles. These are some of my favorite words all put together. You've convinced me.
Rainbow void bubbles.
Okay, so Dave, what are your thoughts here?
Where we can live, breathe, and play with.
Isaiah, do you identify as a Christian or just curious? How would you self-identify?
I'm a quantum heretic. I would get burned at the stake for a lot of things that I believe in, say, for modern Christianity. But there's a form in my practice that is reminiscent of Christianity. It's that of adoption, that we are all inherently sons and daughters of whatever God there is. And we are learning to live with ourselves and our powers forever so that we become more able to handle greater responsibility. We are God's in embryo, basically. Yeah. So the whole Christ myth is that he came down to show us how to reclaim or re-earn our inheritance. That's my perspective on it.
Well, as V said, I'm gonna kind of go back to where V was coming from too, because like these things are interesting to talk about, but to me it still sounds like you are coming from a place where you need there to be a God. And so you're needing to redefine or to define for yourself who and what that God is. And I think what V and I are trying to say, and what I personally feel, is that we can discard those notions of there need to be a God. I think, like you were talking about back in the day when ancient civilizations didn't understand how the world works and they didn't know what thunder and lightning was, for instance, they created gods to answer those questions for themselves. But as we've evolved and as we've gotten a little smarter and as we've learned some things scientifically, we don't need that anymore. And we can say, I don't need a God. I don't need there to be a God. I don't need to try to figure out who and what God is. To me, I go back to there's a passage of scripture that in Corinthians that says, in 1 Corinthians, as our former president would say, that says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. And that I think illustrates what we can do with ancient notions when we were children and we thought Santa Claus brought presents down a chimney, and we grow up and realize how far-fetched that is. We don't substitute a fat man, a jolly man in a red suit for some other form of a present giver on Christmas Day. We just discard the notion altogether. And we realize mom and dad bought presents
the man in the red suit.
Exactly. So we don't land on the need to recreate a God that satisfies the questions that we have. And that's where I think V was talking about, and that's where I come from. I just simply say, there's no need for a God. Let's just figure out how life happened, when life, let's continue to learn about our history, and let's discard this notion of there being a God involved whatsoever.
Yeah, I think for me, that was beautifully put, Dave. Thank you. And yeah, one of my favorite verses as well. My question, Isaiah, is still like, sorry, I keep going back to it. It feels like you're saying that, well, the universe is God, but then you're also saying, no, it's panentheism, which I get is something different. But then you're making a claim about a thing outside of the universe and as actually existing. So that is the claim that I'm interested in. So where did you get that from?
Okay, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. We can do away with the metaphors. So
absolutely, let's do it.
We'd have to go before the beginning of a universe. So in the Big Bang Theory, you've got this singularity. It's this unified state of matter, energy, space-time, all that stuff. But it's assumed or further assumed to be an infinitesimally small dot. But I'm thinking compared to what? And every time we've been shown that, there's this big black space outside of it that's not supposed to exist. We're not supposed to be seeing it from that perspective. The only valid point of perspective is inside the singularity. So go there. Where is its border? Does it have an outside? No. It's effectively infinite. That's one avenue into this. So thinking of before this bubble void universe appears is this infinite singularity. It has no external border. So that state is greater than any other possible state ever.
I'm just getting a kick out of watching Deep Space right now.
I'm trying to find where I'm trying to, like, I thought we said no more metaphors, Isaiah. That seems like mostly metaphor.
Okay, I won't go to metaphor.
Because here's the thing.
Okay.
There is a common understanding of how the Big Bang happened and worked that is colloquially talked about, right? Came from nothing, infinitesimally small and in a larger space of nothing. That's actually not accurate. So my hope here is that we can avoid metaphors that rely on, overly simplified or reductionist understandings of something that is infinitely more complex than I think either of us would understand. So, okay, no metaphor. What is God? What are we a part of? What kind of embryos are we? Space-time rainbow bubble embryos? Help.
We're back to the rainbow bubble, aren't we?
We're never getting away from the rainbow bubble. Those are just going to be a thing now.
Yeah. Well, we are the rainbow bubble. So long story short is in this infinite absolute expanse, this singularity that has no external border, a wavefront travels through it and leaves bubbles in its wake by acoustic cavitation. Okay? It moves, it lowers the pressure. These bubbles are yanked open from the outside in, inside out. It's Bernoulli's principle. It's fluid dynamics. If you have a moving fluid, it is at lower pressure than a fluid at rest. And so that's how you get these bubbles popping open in this infinite expanse, this infinite singularity. And even better, the simplest possible arrangement of this. Simple.
Okay.
And we're going to get into mathematics. We're going to get right into gravity and dark energy. Okay.
Well, maybe on another call. I'm thinking that we're gonna probably need to move on.
Yeah, this rabbit hole has got several tunnels in it.
I feel like Alice. I'm like very slowly falling down a very deep rabbit hole.
I just want to know which of these bubbles Adam and Eve came out of is what I'm thinking. I don't know where we go from here. But
Isaiah, this is fascinating. Thank you for calling in. You certainly are presenting some new stuff that we have not heard on Talk Heathen before, and that's difficult to do. So hat off to you.
We will be dreaming about rainbow bubbles.
I appreciate
this is going to be a thing. So
you
appreciate
are the rainbow bubbles.
Thank you, Isaiah.
Aloha.
I like it.
Aloha. Okay, my head is swimming.
I know. Well, it's fluid dynamics, Dave.
Well, of course. Everyone knows that. And angels had sex with demons, and that's where the evil left-wing cabal is coming from.
Of course.
No, I've learned a few things about QAnon in the last more than I ever wanted to know. Hey, if you like that verse, you're going to love the title of my book.
Oh, yeah.
But When I Became a Man. So yes, I'm plugging my book. So here we go.
Oh, absolutely. That is absolutely acceptable here. All right. We are going to hopefully come back down to earth a little bit and talk to some atheists. But honestly, like, we're making fun. Isaiah, man, that was awesome. That was that was refreshing.
He's obviously thought about this a lot, and he sounds like a very intelligent young man. So old man, I don't know what he is. But a lot of stuff that I hadn't considered lately.
Yep. That's one way to put it.